Welcome to Culture Talk, where we talk about culturally relevant topics that you can use to start conversations about your faith. I'm joined today with Dr. Fazale Rana, biochemist and author. And you know what, Fuzz? I'm very happy to have you. Thank you for joining us today.
Well, as always, Sandra, it's a pleasure to hang out with you.
We're going to be talking about how to love your neighbor during a pandemic. Now, it is a hot topic, interestingly, and kind of curiously enough, because both you and I have had conversations offline about how we as Christians can demonstrate loving our neighbor. But before we dive into those specific tips, let's talk about some questions that you've received in response to some of the things that you've written and posted. So some of the questions that our constituents have asked and Christians have asked are things that we have addressed, but I think we want to address in a more concise manner. So one of the first questions they ask is, how do we even know that COVID is real?
Yeah, Sandra, I can understand why people ask that question, because in the very early days of the COVID-19 pandemic, a lot of people were comparing COVID-19 to the flu. But just some statistics indicate that really they're very different diseases. First of all, we're about to celebrate the year anniversary, believe it or not, of the very first detection of COVID-19 in the United States. And in that year's time, more people have died from COVID-19 than from the flu in the last 5 years. Right now, COVID-19 is the third leading cause of death in the United States. And when we look at data from the CDC, which records excess deaths, that would be the number of deaths above the average deaths that you would expect to see in a year, compared to 2015 to 2018, that yearly average. Right now, we're looking at on the order of probably 500,000 excess deaths. 400,000 are directly attributable to COVID. Another 100,000 are indirectly attributable.
One of the questions that also came in is that God gave us immune systems to fight off such a virus, so we don't need a vaccine. How would you respond to that?
Yeah, well, I mean, our immune systems really are part of God's providential care for humanity, because our immune systems provide us with the means to fight off a number of different types of pathogens. And also, once we've been exposed to a pathogen, our immune system oftentimes will develop an acquired immunity, so that in the future, when we're confronted with those pathogens, we no longer even go through a disease state, as our bodies very quickly battle off those pathogens, preventing the disease from happening a second time. So vaccines are merely trying to work with what our immune system already does to give us that acquired immunity without actually going through the process of experiencing the symptoms of the disease.
Well, thank you for that. I think that's helpful. Another concern that I've heard is that the vaccine was rushed and it was done so quickly that we can't really trust it. But you've written actually a blog article about COVID-19 vaccines and God's providence and all of the years of research leading up to shifting into creating a vaccine for COVID. Can you explain very briefly what that research is?
Yeah, well, I mean, the idea of messenger RNA vaccines or viral vector vaccines, and these are two very different types of vaccines that are being developed by Moderna and Pfizer BioNTech on one hand, and then AstraZeneca and Janssen on the other hand, are vaccines that are new, that haven't really been used to a large degree in the human population. But yet these vaccines have been under development for easily 3 decades. And so we have a really good understanding of these vaccines. They were already in preclinical trials, at least the messenger RNA vaccines, before the COVID-19 pandemic hit. And so just at the point that the pandemic hit, we were already progressing these mRNA vaccines into clinical trials for other viral diseases. So it's just an incredible coincidence that we had these new types of very effective, easy to develop vaccines that were ready to go when the pandemic hit. And I see that coincidence as really reflecting God's providence again.
I think that helps, because I hear that people are concerned it was just from scratch a vaccine that was created, within a few months, and they're concerned about that. There are a bunch of other concerns. One of them is that the vaccine will make women who are of childbearing age, it will make them sterile. So is there any validity to that concern?
Well, I mean, right now there's no evidence for that whatsoever. And I don't even know how you would acquire evidence for that, given that the vaccine has been available only for a matter of months. So there's
Mhm.
no way to know that information. When we look at the mechanism for how the vaccine works, there's no reason to think the vaccine would cause infertility or sterility in either men
Mhm.
or in women. And so that to me is really not a legitimate claim. Now, to be fair, we don't know what the safety profile is for any of the vaccines for women who are pregnant or who are breastfeeding. There's no safety data for that for any of the vaccines that are out there. Uh, it doesn't mean that they're not safe, but that we don't have that data. But so if somebody is in that category, they really should consult with their physician before they receive a vaccine. But keep in mind that women who are pregnant are much more likely to have severe cases of COVID-19 than women who are not. So pregnancy is considered, quote unquote, a comorbidity when it comes to COVID-19. So that's something else to keep in mind as well.
So how can we best demonstrate our love to our neighbors during a pandemic?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think there are very simple and easy things to do, like number one, wearing a mask and wearing it properly, being cognizant about social distancing, really be thoughtful about, visiting people, who might be vulnerable or, unusually susceptible to, a really horrible outcome if they do get COVID-19. But also, I think vaccines are part of the way that we love our neighbor as ourselves. This pandemic is not going to come to an end until we attain herd immunity. And that's going to require somewhere between 70 to 80% of people receiving vaccines. And, uh, and so when we receive a vaccine, not only are we protecting ourselves and protecting those people we love, we're protecting everybody that we interact with, even casually. And so it really is an act of love towards others when we are willing to be vaccinated. And think about this: there are going to be people who cannot tolerate the vaccine. It's a very low number, one in about 100,000, who will develop such a severe allergic reaction that they'll go into anaphylactic shock. And we have an idea of what groups of people those are. So it doesn't mean the vaccine is unsafe. It just means that there's some people that can't tolerate it. Other people are not going to attain immunity even if they are vaccinated, because again, it's a 90% effectiveness rate for the best vaccines. That means 10% of the people will not attain immunity even if they are vaccinated. And so we need to think about the fact that there are these people who cannot receive the vaccine, who can't get that protection. And the only way they'll be protected from COVID-19 is through herd immunity. So the way we can love those people is to do our part and to be vaccinated.
Thank you so much for that, Fuzz. I think that was really informative. And I hope that if those who are watching are still curious or concerned about COVID and about vaccines, go to reasons.org and search for COVID-19 vaccines and God's providence to check out Fuzz's blog. And then also search reputable sites like the CDC.